good to see you playing well with others again.
Just like me.
Maybe temporary.
Justice League, 2017. Complete analyses and explanations. The narrative begins in a world plunged into a profound sense of loss and vulnerability following the catastrophic death of Superman. His sacrifice has left a power vacuum and a planet shrouded in despair, which metaphorically lowers its defenses, acting as a beacon for an ancient cosmic terror. The ancient threat is Steppenwolf, a general from the apocalyptic world of Apocalypse. His return to Earth after millennia is driven by the quest for 3 mother boxes, sentient supercomputers of immense power left behind after a previous invasion attempt. His goal is to unite them to trigger the Unity, which will terraform Earth. Bruce Wayne, haunted by his failure to trust Superman and inspired by his ultimate act of heroism, feels a compelling debt. His motivation evolves from preemptive fear to one of legacy and atonement, recognizing that future threats require a collective response. A League of Defenders. Diana Prince, or Wonder Woman, is grappling with a century of self-imposed exile. Superman's death pulls her back into a more public, active role. She serves as the team's moral and emotional core, advocating for caution and the value of human life, acting as a counterbalance to Batman's more pragmatic strategies. The recruitment phase is where the film's rushed exposition becomes most apparent. Arthur Curry, Aquaman, is introduced as a brooding outsider rejecting his Atlantean throne, his characterization leaning heavily on the archetype of the reluctant hero. Barry Allen, the Flash, provides the film's primary source of youthful energy and comic relief. His portrayal as a socially awkward, inexperienced youth contrasts sharply with the other, more seasoned heroes, and his powers are visually distinguished with a unique lightning-crackling aesthetic. Victor Stone, Cyborg, is arguably the character most compromised in the theatrical cut. His tragic origin, rebuilt by his father using a mother box, is given minimal time, failing to fully explore his profound connection to the film's core technology. The team's initial failure against Steppenwolf in a tunnel battle demonstrates that their raw, uncoordinated power is insufficient. This defeat forces Batman to propose the controversial, desperate plan that becomes the film's second-act turning point: the resurrection of Superman. The resurrection sequence is laden with symbolic and ethical weight. Using the Kryptonian scout ship and the last mother box, the act is framed as a transgression against the natural order, a gamble with potentially cosmic consequences. The hope of the resurrection is immediately met with horror. A confused, memoryless Superman emerges not as a savior but as a primal threat, leading to a frantic showdown with the entire team, showcasing his terrifying power. Superman's violent disorientation serves multiple purposes. It provides a thrilling internal conflict and allows for a poignant character moment where his calming is achieved not by force, but by human connection, Lois Lane's presence. This moment reinforces a central theme of the Superman mythos. It is his human relationships, not his alien power, that anchor his identity as a hero and guide him back to himself. With Superman absent and the final mother box stolen, the climax unfolds in a remote village in Russia. Steppenwolf's base is a growing, terraforming area, a visual representation of the corruption of apocalypse spreading on Earth. The location choice, a populated town, raises the stakes by involving innocent civilians, a classic trope to heighten the hero's protective imperative and the cost of failure. The final battle is structured as a multi-layered, coordinated assault. Each hero has a defined, essential role. Batman provides support, Wonder Woman and Aquaman engage in direct combat, the Flash handles evacuation, and Cyborg interfaces with the mother boxes. Superman's arrival in the final act is the classic cavalry moment. His return, now in his classic suit, symbolizes the restoration of hope. He effortlessly dominates Steppenwolf, showcasing his position as the universe's pinnacle physical power. His actions, saving civilians and assisting each teammate, serve to fully reintegrate him into the world and cement his role as the heart of the newly formed team. The death of Steppenwolf is achieved through collective effort, but finalized by his own parademons, who turn on him upon sensing his fear. This fate reinforces his failure and the merciless nature of Darkseid's hierarchy. The film's denouement establishes the new status quo. The League has officially formed, with a base of operations in the renovated Gotham Harbor Batcave, signaling a move from solo vigilantes to an organized coalition. Superman resumes his life as Clark Kent, and Batman continues his work with a renewed sense of hope. The final scenes tease future threats, most notably the arrival of Deathstroke at Lex Luthor's yacht, setting up a potential Injustice League narrative. A critical analysis of the film's visual language reveals a stark inconsistency. Scenes bearing Zack Snyder's signature, slow-motion, high-contrast imagery, are intercut with brighter, flatter, and more quippy scenes shot by Joss Whedon. This creates a disjointed viewing experience where the film's aesthetic identity feels at war with itself, a direct reflection of the tumultuous production. The character of Steppenwolf is widely analyzed as a fundamental weakness. In this version, he lacks clear motivation beyond serving a distant master, making him a generic, forgettable antagonist. His CGI design was criticized for being unconvincing and generic, further diminishing his presence as a compelling villain with depth or relatable ambitions. The film's humor is a primary point of tonal contention. Whedon's additions, particularly quippy one-liners, often undercut moments of tension or drama, clashing with the more solemn tone of the preceding films. For example, Superman's tense post-resurrection standoff is immediately followed by comedic beats that some viewers felt diminished the gravity of the situation, creating a jarring emotional shift. Henry Cavill's digitally altered face in reshoot scenes became a notorious symbol of the production's troubles. The poor visual effect used to remove his mustache resulted in an uncanny appearance that distracted audiences. This technical flaw highlighted the rushed, compromised nature of the post-production process, breaking viewer immersion and becoming a meta-commentary on the film itself. Thematically, the film attempts to grapple with legacy, fear, and unity. Batman's arc is about moving from isolation to leadership, and Wonder Woman's is about fully reclaiming her public role. However, these themes are often stated rather than deeply explored due to runtime constraints, making the emotional beats feel somewhat unearned compared to a more leisurely paced narrative. The musical score, composed by Danny Elfman, is itself an object of analysis. Elfman incorporated his classic 1989 Batman theme and the iconic John Williams Superman theme. This decision was seen by some as a nostalgic nod, but criticized by others as a pastiche that ignored the established musical identities for the characters in the prior DCU films, signaling a break from the previous tonal direction. From a production standpoint, the 2-hour mandate from Warner Bros. Is analyzed as a catastrophic creative limitation. It necessitated the removal of roughly half of Snyder's shot footage. This excision cut crucial backstory for Cyborg, The Flash, and Steppenwolf, as well as entire subplots, leaving the narrative feeling lean to the point of being anemic and unsatisfying. The film's relationship with its audience is a fascinating case study. Its commercial underperformance and critical panning created a vocal fan movement, the Release the Snyder Cut campaign. This turned Justice League, 2017, from a mere film into a catalyst for a broader conversation about directors' rights, studio interference, and fan agency in modern blockbuster filmmaking. Comparing it to Zack Snyder's Justice League, 2021, is inevitable and essential. The 2021 version is not just longer. It is structurally, tonally, and thematically a different film. It restores Victor Stone's emotional journey as the narrative heart, giving his struggle with identity and power the profound focus it was denied in the theatrical cut. It recontextualizes Steppenwolf, providing him with a tragic motivation linked to his desire to return to Darkseid's favor, making him a more pathetic and understandable figure. The 2021 cut presents a coherent, epic tone, fully embracing a mythic scale and a darker, more dramatic approach that aligns with the preceding films, Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. The inclusion of Darkseid in visions and history lessons expands the cosmic scope, properly establishing the overarching threat that Steppenwolf merely serves. The additional runtime allows for character moments that land with greater emotional weight, such as the extended interaction between the Flash and Iris West, which grounds his heroism. The famous Speed Force sequence during the final battle is presented in its full, visually stunning and emotionally charged form, rather than the abbreviated version seen in 2017. Cyborg's pivotal role in separating the mother boxes is given proper technological and emotional resonance, fulfilling his arc from cursed accident to the team's most powerful key. The film's conclusion, including the Nightmare epilogue and the Martian Manhunter scene, sets up a larger saga, illustrating the ambitious long-form storytelling that was originally intended. The use of a 4:3 aspect ratio, as Snyder intended for IMAX, gives the 2021 film a distinct, almost mythic painting-like quality, further distinguishing its visual identity. Junkie XL's complete score provides a consistent, driving, and emotionally textured sonic landscape that evolves the musical themes established in the earlier films. The existence of the two cuts offers an unparalleled real-world case study in how editing, tone, and runtime can fundamentally alter narrative intent and character perception. In the theatrical cut, the resurrection of Superman feels more like a simple plot solution. In the Snyder cut, it carries heavier mythological and ethical consequences, framed as a potential doom for the world. The theatrical version's ending is notably lighter and more contained, focusing on a solidified team. The Snyder cut's ending is more ambiguous, foreboding, and expansive, pointing toward an ongoing war. The reception of the two films starkly contrasts. The 2017 version was met with mixed to negative reviews, often criticized for being shallow and compromised. The 2021 version, while not without its detractors, received overwhelmingly positive responses from fans and significantly stronger critical reviews, particularly for its character development and ambition. The core story of heroes uniting against a world-ending threat is serviceable in the 2017 film and elevated by a charismatic cast who share genuine chemistry. However, it is fundamentally undermined by a generic villain, a rushed plot, and a tonally inconsistent execution stemming from its famously fractured production. The production's chaos was marked by a dramatic change in creative direction following a personal tragedy for director Zack Snyder, who stepped away from the project. Warner Brothers brought in Joss Whedon to complete the film, tasking him not just with finishing post-production, but with writing and directing significant additional scenes and reshoots. Whedon's mandate was to lighten the film's tone, add more humor, and reduce the runtime, resulting in a final product that was a patchwork of two conflicting visions. This led to jarring tonal shifts, narrative gaps, and the visual inconsistencies that define the viewing experience of the theatrical release. Actors, most notably Ray Fisher, Cyborg, later stated that the theatrical cut gutted their characters' emotional arcs, removing scenes vital to their development. Fisher's public allegations regarding on-set conduct during the Whedon-led reshoots added another layer of controversy to the film's legacy, sparking an internal investigation at Warner Media. The theatrical cut often feels like a diluted attempt to replicate the success of Marvel's The Avengers, with character dynamics and humor that feel imported rather than organic to the DCU's established world. Critics drew direct parallels between the heroes' personalities and their Marvel counterparts, arguing the film sacrificed the unique, operatic identity established in Man of Steel. The film's historical significance now lies less in its artistic achievements and more in sparking the unprecedented fan movement that led to the release of the Snyder Cut. This campaign redefined the relationship between studios, filmmakers, and fans in the streaming era, proving that passionate audiences could influence corporate decisions. The 2021 director's cut recontextualizes the theatrical version as a truncated and altered product, presenting a more complete, ambitious, and character-driven epic. Many fans and a significant number of critics now consider the Snyder Cut to be the definitive version of the story, a complete filmmaker's statement. The theatrical cut's climax, while action-packed, feels relatively small in scale. The Snyder Cut's final battle is grander, more desperate, and intricately choreographed across multiple fronts. Character motivations are clearer in the extended version. For instance, Batman's guilt and drive are more palpably tied to the nightmare future he witnessed. The Mother Boxes transition from simple plot devices to almost mythological entities with their own presence and history, deeply tied to Cyborg's origin and the history of Earth. The Amazonian and Atlantean battles to protect their mother boxes are reduced to brief flashes in 2017, but are full, compelling sequences in 2021, enriching the world building. The Flash's time travel climax is set up with proper foreshadowing and scientific explanation in the Snyder Cut, whereas in the theatrical version, it feels more like a sudden, deus ex machina power. Superman's character arc is more nuanced in the restoration. His return feels more like a spiritual rebirth, and his black suit symbolizes a period of recovery and rediscovery. The film's ultimate message in both versions is one of hope forged through unity, but the 2017 version delivers it quickly, while the 2021 version earns it through extended trials. From a business perspective, the film's performance contributed to a major strategic shift for the DC film universe, moving away from a tightly interconnected Snyderverse saga. It led to a model more focused on standalone director-driven projects and multiverse concepts, as seen in later films like The Batman and Aquaman and The Lost Kingdom. The visual effects, outside of Cavill's face, are also indicative of a rushed post-production, with many backgrounds and creatures appearing obviously digital and weightless. Steppenwolf's armor in the theatrical cut lacks the intricate, living texture of the Snyder Cut's design, which changed based on his emotional state and environment. The team dynamic in the theatrical cut hinges on banter, while in the Snyder Cut, it is built more on shared trauma, mutual respect, and a growing understanding of their collective destiny. Lois Lane's role is largely reduced to a plot device to calm Superman in 2017, whereas her grief and process are given slightly more room to breathe in the extended version. Martha Kent's scene with Lois is another casualty of the cuts, removing a touching moment of shared mourning that deepened the human impact of Superman's death. The theatrical cut's opening, with the cell phone video of Superman, aims for a lighter, more hopeful tone about his legacy, contrasting with the somber, slow-motion morning scenes Snyder filmed. The Everybody Knows song sequence in the theatrical cut is a pure Whedon addition, setting a more cynical, yet quippy, tone that differs from Snyder's visual prologue of a world without hope. The history lesson with the ancient alliance of men, Amazons, and Atlanteans against Darkseid is severely truncated in 2017, losing its epic scale and crucial exposition about the mother boxes and the threat of apocalypse. In conclusion, Justice League, 2017, is a cinematic artifact of corporate compromise. Its core story is elevated by a charismatic cast but undermined by its execution. Its primary value for film scholars and fans may now be as the most public and dramatic example of studio interference in the 21st century tentpole era. The film serves as a what-if scenario and a direct comparison point for how directorial vision, runtime, and studio mandates can create two radically different products from the same raw materials. The journey from the 2017 theatrical release to the 2021 Snyder Cut remains one of the most unique and consequential sagas in modern Hollywood history. It underscores that a film is not merely what is shot, but what is chosen in the editing room, and who gets to make those final, defining choices. The profound thematic shift from nihilistic despair to fragile hope is the central arc of this fractured narrative. This evolution is not smoothly earned, but abruptly imposed by competing directorial visions, leaving character motivations feeling partially realized. The world's mourning for Superman is presented more as a plot convenience than a deeply felt emotional reality within the film's universe. This lack of palpable grief undermines the very catalyst for Steppenwolf's arrival and the League's formation. The mother boxes awaken because fear has permeated the planet, yet this global anxiety is illustrated through brief, disconnected vignettes rather than a sustained atmosphere. Consequently, the stakes feel abstract, and the villain's plan lacks the immediate visceral threat needed to fully engage the audience. The assembly of the team follows a predictable checklist format, prioritizing efficiency over organic discovery. Each recruitment scene functions as a compressed trailer for future solo films, rather than an integral chapter in this collective story. This approach renders the foundational unity of the Justice League transactional, built on urgent necessity rather than burgeoning mutual respect or shared ideology. The narrative desperately requires breathing room to explore the philosophical differences between Batman's gritty pragmatism and Wonder Woman's compassionate idealism. These ideological clashes are hinted at, but never mature into meaningful dramatic conflict that could define the team's early dynamics. Instead, their disagreements are resolved through simplistic quips or by the overwhelming urgency of the external threat, which stifles any potential for nuanced intra-team drama. The film's tonal whiplash is its most defining and detrimental characteristic, a direct artifact of its troubled post-production process. Scenes of genuine pathos, like Victor Stone's alienation, are abruptly undercut by jarring comedic asides that betray the character's established pain. This inconsistency prevents the audience from fully investing in the emotional reality of any given moment, as the film itself seems unsure of its desired effect. The cinematography and color grading shift dramatically between sequences, visually signposting which director was responsible for which footage. Snyder's sequences are often steeped in shadow and saturated color, framing heroes as mythological figures in a grand tableau. Whedon's inserts are brighter, flatter, and oriented around tighter shots focused on dialogue delivery and character reaction beats. This creates a disjointed visual rhythm that disrupts the narrative flow and constantly reminds the viewer of the film's artifice. The villain, Steppenwolf, exists purely as a functional obstacle, devoid of compelling motivation or memorable presence. His design, a generic CGI armor-clad giant, lacks the distinctive menace or thematic resonance of a great antagonist. His dialogue is expository, serving only to explain his plan and threaten the heroes, offering no glimpse into a personality or history that could inspire pity or fascination. This renders the final confrontation a purely physical, and therefore less engaging spectacle, as defeating him carries no ideological or moral weight. The much-discussed resurrection of Superman embodies the film's core compromise, a moment of immense narrative and symbolic potential reduced to a plot point. The ethical dilemma of playing God and the potential consequences are raised only to be immediately dismissed once he is stabilized. The subsequent battle between the League and a confused Superman, while visually dynamic, feels emotionally hollow because his character's interior journey is completely skipped. He is a weapon that malfunctions and is then reprogrammed, rather than a man grappling with a second chance at life and identity. The iconic black suit, a symbol of recovery and rebirth in Kryptonian lore, is conspicuously absent, replaced immediately by the bright classic suit, a visual metaphor for the film's rush to restore a familiar status quo without exploring the transformative journey. The final act in the Russian village is a standard superhero set piece that fails to distinguish itself visually or strategically from countless other cinematic battles. The team's coordination feels basic, a simple division of labor rather than a showcase of synergistic power where their abilities combine in innovative ways. The Flash's role, while crucial, is limited to pushing one object very fast, a simplistic application of his reality-bending powers that hints at greater potential left unexplored. Superman's arrival to decisively end the fight undermines the concept of a league, reducing his teammates to supporting players who merely set the stage for his victory. This power imbalance, while comic accurate, is not dramatized in a way that feels satisfying or that elevates the contributions of the less powerful members. The film's score by Danny Elfman is a pastiche of nostalgic callbacks that actively works against establishing a unique sonic identity for the DCU. The reintroduction of the classic 1989 Batman and 1978 Superman themes, while emotionally resonant for some, ignores the powerful musical legacies built by Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL. This musical reset disconnects the film from the auditory world of Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, further alienating the segment of the audience invested in that continuity. It represents a studio desire to evoke safer, recognized iconography rather than build upon the existing foundation. The post-credit scenes feel grafted from a different narrative ambition, teasing a future that the film's own compromised nature made unlikely. The Flash and Superman's race suggests a lighter, more jovial dynamic the main feature never established. Lex Luthor's meeting with Deathstroke promises a Legion of Doom plotline that, given the subsequent studio course correction, became a narrative dead end. These teases ultimately highlight the film's lack of a coherent, confident vision for its own future, instead throwing ideas at the wall in hopes of generating franchise momentum. The theatrical cut's greatest failure is its treatment of Cyborg, whose origin story is the emotional and technological heart of the Mother Box mythology. By reducing his struggle with a mechanized body and fractured family to mere glimpses, the film severs the direct human connection to the apocalyptic threat. His ability to interface with the Mother Boxes should feel like a terrifying vulnerability and immense responsibility, but instead it plays as a convenient technopathic skill. Ray Fisher's performance hints at a profound depth of anger, pain, and longing that the script and editing fail to support, leaving the character as a plot device rather than the tragic soul he was conceived to be. The contrast with the 2021 Snyder Cut is therefore not merely quantitative but qualitative, revealing how the same basic plot skeleton can support radically different thematic tissue and emotional depth. The theatrical version operates on a simplistic level of good versus evil, while the restored version engages with concepts of fate, legacy, redemption, and the corrupting nature of power. The inclusion of Darkseid and the Nightmare timeline in the Snyder Cut provides a terrifying context for the hero's actions, framing their unity as a desperate, last-ditch effort to alter a predetermined doom. This expansive scope makes the victory in 2017 feel minor and inconsequential, lacking that same grand cosmological weight. The difference in Steppenwolf's characterization is particularly instructive. In the Snyder Cut, he is a fallen zealot seeking redemption from a god who despises weakness, which makes him paradoxically more relatable and tragic. His enhanced design, with living armor that responds to his environment, visually communicates his connection to Apocalypse in a way the bland, static 2017 design never could. This transformation underscores how thoughtful design and clear motivation can elevate a seemingly generic foe into a compelling component of the narrative. The resurrection of Superman in the extended cut is treated with the gravity of a dark ritual, with dialogue explicitly framing it as a potential world-ending mistake. The famous nightmare Vision Bruce experiences is directly triggered by the act, creating a powerful cause-and-effect relationship that the theatrical version entirely lacks. Superman's return is thus fraught with dramatic irony and tension, as the audience understands the potential catastrophic cost better than the characters do. His path to memory recovery is also more gradual, involving a poignant journey to the family farm and a quiet moment with Lois before donning the black suit, which symbolizes a period of transition and healing. The final battle in the Snyder Cut is a true war of attrition across multiple fronts, with each hero pushed to their absolute limit in a way that feels genuinely desperate. The Flash's pivotal time reversal sequence is given proper setup and payoff, framed as a transcendent moment where he taps into the Speed Force at great personal risk, rather than simply running fast to charge a box. Cyborg's internal battle with the unified mother boxes is the emotional climax, as he literally and metaphorically reassembles his shattered self to save the world. This structure validates his entire arc and makes him the central hero of the finale, a honor stripped from him in the theatrical edit. Superman's arrival remains decisive, but it feels more like the crucial reinforcement in a battle the others are actively winning through immense sacrifice, rather than a deus ex machina that renders their efforts secondary. The epilogue of the Snyder Cut, while controversial for its teases, solidifies the film as part of a larger mosaic, giving it the feeling of a chapter in an epic rather than a self-contained product. This ambition, whether one appreciates the specific story directions or not, lends the entire endeavor a greater sense of purpose and cohesion that the standalone 2017 film sorely lacks. The Martian Manhunter's appearance, while a narrative cul-de-sac, serves a thematic purpose by bridging the human and alien worlds, suggesting a wider universe of heroes ready to emerge from the shadows. From a cultural standpoint, the journey of this film transcends its content, becoming a landmark event in fan-studio relations. The Release the Snyder Cut movement demonstrated the potent force of organized, sustained online advocacy, challenging traditional Hollywood hierarchies. It proved that a studio's declared final product is not necessarily immutable, especially in the era of streaming content where alternative versions can be monetized. This has undoubtedly influenced how other studios manage fan expectations and archival projects, introducing a new variable into blockbuster production calculus. The affair also sparked intense debate about authorship versus collaboration in franchise filmmaking, and where the line should be drawn between a director's vision and a studio's stewardship of its intellectual property. For the actors, the experience was uniquely bifurcated. They performed one version of the film under one director, then returned to perform often contradictory material for another, creating a challenging dissonance. Their subsequent public comments, particularly from Ray Fisher and Gal Gadot, revealed the difficult and sometimes toxic environment that can fester during such drastic, rushed creative changes. This human cost behind the scenes adds a somber layer to the viewing experience, knowing the final product caused real professional and personal strife. Ultimately, the 2017 Justice League is best understood as a fascinating failure, a cautionary tale of panic and compromise in the modern franchise era. Its positive elements, the cast chemistry, isolated moments of spectacle, and earnest attempts at humor, are trapped in a framework that cannot support them. It fails as a coherent continuation of the Snyderverse, as a compelling imitation of the Marvel formula, and as a satisfying standalone epic. Its legacy, therefore, is paradoxically secured by its own inadequacy. It is the essential foil that gives the 2021 Snyder Cut its power and cultural significance. The two films together form a unique diptych in cinema history, one showing the broken artifact of corporate filmmaking, and the other revealing the unvarnished, for better or worse artistic intention. This makes studying Justice League, 2017, far more compelling than the film itself, as it serves as a Rosetta Stone for understanding the pressures, conflicts, and perils inherent in creating a shared universe in the shadow of overwhelming precedent. It stands as a testament to the fact that a superhero team-up, the ultimate reward for long-form storytelling, cannot be convincingly manufactured from whole cloth without the narrative and emotional foundation that makes the union meaningful. The film's rush to emulate a successful rival's climax ignored the crucial narrative work that made that climax resonate, highlighting a fundamental misunderstanding of why audiences connect with these collective myths. In the end, the theatrical Justice League is a collection of moments in search of a soul, a film where the seams are not just visible but have become its defining feature, ensuring its place in film history not for its artistry, but for the dramatic story of its own creation and the unprecedented second chance it inadvertently spawned. The ultimate victory in the theatrical cut fails to resonate on a meaningful level because it lacks a foundation of earned camaraderie and shared sacrifice, leaving the audience with spectacle devoid of soul. Each character exits the film essentially as they entered, with minimal internal growth or changed perspective on their role in the world, which stunts the narrative's emotional payoff. The promise of the Justice League, as an idea, is presented as its own conclusion, rather than the beginning of a complex new dynamic that will require constant negotiation and trust. This simplistic treatment reduces the world's greatest heroes to a functional task force, missing the profound opportunity to explore the philosophical and logistical challenges of such an alliance. The film's abrupt ending, with the team posing in the ruins of the Batcave, feels unearned and ironically staged, a hollow mimicry of iconic comic book splash pages without the years of story that give such images weight. This focus on iconic imagery over substantive character development reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of the source material's enduring appeal, which lies in personal struggles as much as cosmic battles. The film's legacy is forever intertwined with the meta-narrative of its production, a reality that overshadows any of its narrative intentions and makes objective critique nearly impossible. It exists as a public case file on studio interference, a talking point in debates about cinematic universes, and a catalyst for a fan movement that changed industry conversations. This context drains the film of its ability to function as a standalone story, as every scene is subconsciously compared to what might have been or what later was revealed in the director's cut. For the casual viewer, it is a confusing and tonally erratic experience. For the devoted fan, it is a document of profound disappointment and missed potential. The theatrical cut's most damaging omission is the sense of mythic scale and history that the Snyder Cut later wove into its fabric. The feeling that these events are part of an ancient, cyclical war between light and darkness. Without the presence of Darkseid in the past, Steppenwolf's invasion feels isolated and oddly petty, lacking the terrifying lineage that would justify uniting every major hero on the planet. The mother boxes consequently seem like powerful tools rather than ancient, malevolent artifacts tied to the very origin of the DC Universe's pantheon of gods and heroes. This reduction of scope makes the conflict feel smaller, more like a localized disaster response than a chapter in an epic saga for the soul of humanity. The characterization of the Flash as purely a source of neurotic humor ignores the profound tragedy and scientific genius inherent to Barry Allen, flattening him into a stereotype of millennial anxiety without the compelling depth that makes the character unique. His pivotal role in the climax, while visually clear, lacks the emotional catharsis of a hero overcoming his self-doubt to perform a miracle, because his self-doubt has been played exclusively for laughs throughout the film. This comedic framing undermines the moment he must become the most important person in the universe, creating a disconnect between his established persona and his required narrative function. Aquaman's portrayal, while charismatic, leans entirely into the reluctant outsider trope without granting him the moments of royal gravitas and connection to the ancient world that would hint at his true destiny as a king. His powers are displayed, but his culture is barely hinted at, making Atlantis feel like a set piece rather than a living civilization with its own high stakes in this conflict. This treatment renders his eventual decision to fight somewhat superficial, based more on personal pique than a deep sense of duty to the surface world or his own submerged people. The film's visual effects, beyond the infamous Superman lip, contribute to a pervasive sense of artificiality that distances the audience. The parademons lack weight and menace. The Russian village environment feels like a sterile digital backdrop, and Cyborg's entirely CGI body often seems disconnected from the human performance in his face. This over-reliance on unconvincing digital imagery breaks the tactile realism that grounds even the most fantastical superhero narratives, reminding viewers they are watching a composite of effects shots rather than inhabiting a believable world. The sound design and mixing follow a generic blockbuster template, lacking the distinctive auditory signatures that could define each hero's power set or the unique sonic threat of the mother boxes, further homogenizing the experience into a forgettable sensory slurry. The editing is perhaps the most critical failure, as it prioritizes pace over coherence, cutting away from moments of potential emotional resonance to rush to the next plot point or joke, preventing any sequence from achieving its full dramatic potential. This frantic rhythm suggests a deep anxiety on the part of the editors, a fear that if the audience is given a moment to think, they will notice the hollow core of the narrative or the inconsistencies in character logic. The film's treatment of Batman is particularly jarring, as it attempts to retrofit him with a quippy, optimistic demeanor that contradicts not only his previous DCU appearances, but the fundamental trauma at the heart of the character. His lines about faith and working together feel unearned, imposed by the script's need for a team leader rather than emerging from a genuine arc of redemption following the events of Batman v Superman. This sanitization of Bruce Wayne's darkness removes the compelling friction that his presence should bring to a team of superpowered beings, making him just another squad member with gadgets. Wonder Woman's role is largely reactive. She is the moral center, but her agency is limited to supporting Batman's plan and fighting effectively, with little exploration of how her specific history and worldview shape her approach to leadership or conflict. The film sidelines her thematic weight as a bridge between mankind and gods, using her primarily for her combat prowess and occasional expository wisdom about ancient threats, which underutilizes the character's unique narrative potential. The complete absence of any meaningful exploration of the political or social ramifications of a public, alien invasion and the subsequent formation of a super team renders the film narratively weightless, existing in a vacuum where actions have no consequences beyond the immediate physical threat. This lack of world building beyond the immediate crisis makes the film feel inconsequential, as if it exists solely to check a franchise box rather than to expand and deepen a living, breathing fictional universe. The theatrical cut's greatest sin, in the final analysis, is its lack of respect for the audience's intelligence and emotional investment, assuming that bright colors, quips, and large explosions are sufficient to convey the grandeur of the Justice League's first union. It misunderstands that the power of these icons lies not in their abilities, but in their humanity, their flaws, and the monumental effort it takes for them to overcome their isolation to form a family. By sanding down the edges of these characters in pursuit of a safer, more marketable tone, the film loses the very qualities that make them compelling and timeless. The comparison to the Avengers is not simply about quality, but about intent. Where that film felt like an organic culmination of carefully laid groundwork, Justice League feels like a frantic, premature extraction, pulling the team together before the individual components were fully formed or understood. This results in a team whose dynamic is stated rather than demonstrated, whose unity is mandated by the plot rather than forged in the crucible of shared experience and hard-won trust. The film's ultimate resolution, with Superman smiling and joking, is meant to signal a new dawn, but instead feels like a corporate mandate to rebrand the character, ignoring the complex journey of alienation and sacrifice that defined his earlier cinematic appearances. This tonal reboot within a single film, without narrative justification, is disorienting and disrespectful to the character's established arc, serving as the clearest indicator of the studio's panicked course correction. The theatrical Justice League thus stands as a monument to the perils of consensus-driven creation, where a clear, if divisive, vision is deemed too risky and is replaced by a committee-designed product intended to offend no one and, in doing so, inspires passion in no one. Its value to cinema studies is immense, as a perfect storm of tragic circumstance, corporate anxiety, and cultural shift, all captured in a 2-hour product that is less a movie and more a battlefield where different ideologies of superhero storytelling clashed, with the audience as the collateral damage. For the future of the DC film universe, this film marked the end of a centralized, director-driven saga, leading to a scattered, multiversal approach where the failure to create a cohesive whole became a guiding principle, allowing for standalone successes, but abandoning the grand interconnected ambition that began the endeavor. The film's most enduring image may not be any frame from its runtime, but the side-by-side comparisons that flooded the internet after the Snyder Cut's release, visual proof of how color grading, aspect ratio, and scene selection can fundamentally alter the soul of a story. This makes Justice League, 2017, a unique, almost participatory text. To analyze it is to inevitably analyze its shadow version, its production, and its cultural fallout, a 3-act drama that is far more engaging than the film itself. It is a cautionary tale about the danger of letting market research and fear dictate art, and a testament to the fact that in the modern era, a film is never truly finished until the audience decides it is, and sometimes, not even then. The film's opening scenes attempt to establish a world blanketed by grief, yet this mourning feels curiously shallow, depicted through montage rather than deeply felt narrative. This emotional deficit at the story's core cripples the motivational foundation for both the hero's urgency and the villain's opportunity, rendering the plot mechanical. Superman's absence should be a haunting, tangible void, a silent character influencing every decision. But it is treated as a solved problem to be fixed rather than a profound philosophical wound on the world's psyche. The portrayal of everyday people's fear and cynicism is brief and oversimplified, missing the chance to explore how society fractures without its symbolic North Star. Consequently, the planetary despair that beckons Steppenwolf is an informed characteristic, not an atmospheric reality we experience, weakening the very premise of the invasion. Bruce Wayne's journey from brooding vigilante to hopeful team organizer lacks the necessary transitional scenes to feel authentic, relying on actorly implication over scripted development. His newfound optimism clashes dissonantly with the traumatized, borderline nihilistic figure from the previous film, creating a character schism that is never bridged narratively. The guilt he expressed over Superman's death transforms into a vague sense of duty, bypassing any meaningful exploration of atonement or personal reckoning for his previous actions. His recruitment methods are pragmatic to a fault, approaching metahumans as assets to be acquired rather than damaged individuals to be understood, which should create fascinating conflict that is swiftly smoothed over. This unexplored tension between Batman's instrumental view of the team and Wonder Woman's more empathetic approach represents a missed opportunity for compelling leadership drama. Diana Prince's role is frustratingly passive, often relegated to providing historical exposition or reacting to Batman's plans rather than actively shaping the mission's ethos. Her century of hiding is mentioned but not felt, as she steps into the public sphere with minimal personal cost or internal debate about breaking her self-imposed exile. The script denies her the agency to truly lead, positioning her as the team's conscience but not its strategist, subtly reinforcing a stereotypical dynamic despite her superior experience and power. Her moments of heroism are visually spectacular but emotionally isolated, serving as punctuations of action rather than integral to her character's evolution within the group dynamic. The potential for her to challenge Batman's methods on a philosophical level is hinted at, but abandoned in favor of a quick, conflict-free consensus. The introduction of Arthur Curry relies entirely on Jason Momoa's formidable charisma to mask a paper-thin archetype of the reluctant loner. His connection to the plot is incidental, tied to an Atlantean mother box he seems to care little about, which undermines his stakes in a conflict threatening the entire world, including his own kingdom. The film tells us he rejects his royal heritage, but shows us no complexity in that rejection, no torn loyalty between the land and sea that would add depth to his eventual commitment. His powers are displayed as isolated feats of strength, lacking the mystical fluidity or connection to a larger, ancient mythology that defines the character in other media. His integration into the team feels like a foregone conclusion the plot requires, not an earned character choice born of changing perspective or growing duty. Barry Allen's characterization prioritizes comic relief derived from social anxiety, reducing the genius-level forensic scientist to a starstruck fanboy without showcasing the intellect that makes him a hero. His fear and inexperience are played for laughs so consistently that it becomes difficult to believe in his capability when the crucial moment arrives, creating a tonal disconnect in the finale. The deep personal tragedy of his father's wrongful imprisonment, a core driver for his heroism, is reduced to a single line of dialogue, stripping his motivation of all pathos and making his heroism seem like a hobby. His scientific explanations for his powers and the mother boxes are rushed or absent, missing the chance to establish him as the team's intellectual innovator alongside his physical gifts. The Flash's unique perspective, seeing the world in a slowed, particle-level detail, is visualized but never used as a narrative tool to solve problems or gain insight, limiting him to a transport device. Victor Stone's truncated arc is the film's most glaring narrative failure, as his body and mind are the literal convergence point of the film's core technological and emotional themes. We are shown glimpses of his tragedy, the accident, the father's guilt, the monstrous transformation, but are denied the scenes of him grappling with the profound loss of his identity, humanity, and future. His relationship with his father is a source of immense potential drama that is referenced but never explored, leaving their reconciliation in the finale feeling unearned and sentimental. His technopathic abilities are presented as a convenient plot-solving Swiss Army knife, without the accompanying horror of being permanently wired into the world's digital infrastructure, a concept ripe for existential dread. By sidelining Cyborg's interiority, the film severs the human heart from its own story, making the mother box threat technological instead of profoundly personal. Steppenwolf's entire existence is in service of a generic conquest goal, his dialogue a monotonous series of threats and exposition about the mother boxes and his desire to please Darkseid. We learn nothing of his history, his relationship to Apocalypse, or any internal desire beyond subjugation, making him a placeholder antagonist rather than a compelling foe with a recognizable philosophy. His CGI-rendered form lacks texture, weight, or expressive detail, existing as a weightless digital entity that cannot convey menace through anything but size and generic roaring. The parademons, extensions of his will, are equally generic insectoid drones, lacking the terrifying thematic resonance of being former conquered beings transformed by fear. His defeat carries no catharsis because he represented no idea to be defeated, only a temporary physical obstacle to be overcome. The resurrection of Superman is handled with startling narrative expediency, treating a moment of profound metaphysical and ethical consequence as a straightforward engineering problem. The moral debate about playing God, the risk of creating an uncontrollable force, is paid lip service but quickly dismissed in the rush to the next action beat. Superman's disorientation and subsequent attack should be a scene of tragic horror, but it is undercut by comedic asides and a general lack of consequence, as no one is meaningfully injured and the conflict is resolved by a simple deus ex machina, Lois's arrival. His recovery of memory and personality is instantaneous upon seeing Lois, bypassing any interesting exploration of a reconstructed identity or the psychological trauma of death and rebirth. The symbolic significance of his return, the hope it should re-inject into the narrative, is stated by characters but never felt by the audience, as the film hasn't earned that emotional crescendo. The final battle sequence, while large in scale, is small in imagination, defaulting to a familiar, hold the line against the alien horde template without utilizing the team's combined abilities in innovative, synergistic ways. Each hero fights in their own lane, their powers merely overlapping in proximity rather than creatively combining to produce tactical advantages unique to this specific team composition. The Flash's pivotal role is reduced to a single, clearly telegraphed task: charging the mother box, neglecting the myriad other ways his control of time and physics could alter the battlefield dynamically. Cyborg's internal struggle with the Unity is visualized as a standard technological interface battle, lacking the visceral, body horror tension of a man fighting to retain his soul against assimilating technology. Superman's arrival, while a crowd-pleasing moment, retrospectively diminishes the team's struggle, as his power level is so disproportionately high that the preceding battle feels like a delay until the real hero appears. The film's aesthetic is a jarring palimpsest of two conflicting visual languages, with Snyder's high contrast, desaturated, and painterly frames colliding with Whedon's brighter, more conventionally lit and composed shots. This creates subconscious whiplash for the viewer, constantly reminding them of the film's fractured creation and preventing immersion in a consistent cinematic world. The color grading shifts from sequence to sequence, with some scenes featuring a grim, murky palette and others a flat, television-like brightness, further eroding the film's visual cohesion. The editing between these disparate styles is often abrupt, prioritizing narrative continuity over tonal or visual continuity, making the film feel like a hastily assembled patchwork. This lack of a directorial through-line extends to the action choreography, where Snyder's preference for heavy, impactful, slow-motion-enhanced combat clashes with Whedon's faster, more quippy, and traditionally shot skirmishes. Danny Elfman's score represents a fundamental rejection of the established musical identity painstakingly built by Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL for the DCU's trinity of heroes. The injection of the 1989 Batman and 1978 Superman themes is a nostalgic ploy that emotionally contradicts the younger, more tormented iterations of these characters presented in this universe. This musical regression undermines the audience's connection to the character arcs from previous films, essentially hitting an auditory reset button that says forget what came before. The new themes for the League and Steppenwolf are generic and forgettable, lacking the distinctive melodic hooks or innovative sonic textures that could define this new alliance. The score thus becomes a metaphor for the entire production, a retreat to safe, recognized iconography at the expense of developing a bold, cohesive, and contemporary identity. The film's structural pacing is disastrous, rushing through essential character beats and world building to adhere to a restrictive 2-hour mandate, leaving the narrative gasping for air. Scenes that require room to breathe, Cyborg's origin, the Flash's visit to his father, the history lesson, are truncated into ineffective CliffsNotes versions that convey information but no emotional weight. This breakneck speed creates a paradox where the film feels both rushed and dull, as it constantly moves forward without taking the time to make us care about where it's going. The emotional peaks, such as the resurrection or the final victory, land with a thud because the foundation of character investment necessary to support them has been sacrificed at the altar of brevity. The editing feels panicked, as if afraid the audience will lose interest if a single moment lingers for a second too long on a character's face or a silent, meaningful glance. The film's treatment of its own lore is shallow and expedient, introducing concepts like the mother boxes, the Unity, and the old gods, without providing the mythological context that would make them feel ancient and significant. The history lesson is a blur of CGI action that fails to convey the epic, coalitional struggle of man, Amazon, and Atlantean against a true dark god, reducing it to a flashy but empty preview. By omitting Darkseid from this history, the threat is immediately lessened, making Steppenwolf a lone invader rather than the harbinger of an unimaginable cosmic tyranny. This minimization of stakes makes the League's formation seem like an overreaction to a manageable, if large, problem, rather than the desperate last stand it is meant to be. The rich tapestry of DC mythology is treated as disposable set dressing, stripped of its grandeur to serve a simplistic, linear invasion plot. The dialogue is a minefield of tonal inconsistency, where portentous, mythic declarations are sandwiched between quippy, self-aware jokes that evaporate any sense of gravitas. Characters like Batman are forced to deliver lines that fundamentally clash with their established personas, creating a dissonance that pulls the viewer out of the story. The attempts at humor often rely on contemporary references and awkward banter that feel imported from a different, more glib cinematic universe, failing to arise organically from the characters' personalities or the dire situation. Expository dialogue is clunky and frequent, used to patch over the gaps in storytelling left by the removed scenes, making characters sound like narrators of their own plot. The lack of distinctive, character-revealing speech patterns flattens the team's interactions, making their conversations functional rather than revealing of deeper relationships or conflicts. The film's conclusion fails to provide a satisfying epilogue that reflects on the seismic shift that has just occurred, the public, world-saving debut of a team of superheroes. We get no sense of the global reaction, the political ramifications, the media frenzy, or the new paradigm of hope or fear that the League's existence creates. The heroes simply return to their headquarters, posing for a de facto team photo, as if the story's purpose was solely to assemble the roster for a future film. This lack of consequence reinforces the feeling that the film exists in a narrative vacuum, an isolated episode with no lasting impact on its own world. The post-credits scenes tease conflicts that feel disconnected from the story we just witnessed, highlighting the film's role as a franchise cog rather than a complete, satisfying narrative in its own right. The critical and commercial reception of the theatrical cut was a self-fulfilling prophecy of a project that pleased no distinct audience, alienating fans of Snyder's operatic vision while failing to win over viewers seeking the consistent lightness of the Marvel model. It became a cultural shorthand for studio-led franchise misfires, a warning sign for what happens when art is designed by committee in reaction to prior criticism rather than through a confident, singular vision. The subsequent Snyder Cut movement, while born of genuine passion, also framed the theatrical version as a historical curio, the bad timeline version of a film that retroactively became a fascinating but flawed rough draft. The film's legacy is thus permanently bifurcated, its value inextricably linked to its role as a catalyst for a larger conversation about authorship in the blockbuster era. It stands not as a film to be analyzed on its own artistic merits, but as the central piece of evidence in a grand, real-world drama about power, tragedy, and redemption in modern Hollywood. Ultimately, Justice League 2017 is a poignant study in loss, not just the fictional loss of Superman, but the loss of directorial vision, narrative coherence, and thematic ambition. It is a ghost of a movie, haunted by the more complete, ambitious, and flawed film it could have been, a shadow cast by the light of an unseen sun. Its every frame is a negotiation, a compromise, a palimpsest where the original text is visible but obscured by later, frantic revisions. To watch it is to witness not a story, but the aftermath of a cinematic battle, where the casualties are character arcs, thematic depth, and directorial integrity. It remains essential viewing not for entertainment, but as a masterclass in how not to build a shared universe, a permanent monument to the dangers of letting fear dictate art. The film's visual effects become a character in themselves, a constant reminder of the film's rushed and compromised nature, preventing immersion into the world of the story. These effects lack weight and texture, from the plasticky sheen of Cyborg's body to the weightless parademons, creating a spectacle that feels hollow and digital rather than tactile and dangerous. This pervasive artificiality clashes with the few practical elements, making the heroes themselves feel like digital inserts in a wholly synthetic environment, robbing the action of its visceral impact. The extensive use of green screens is palpable, creating a disconnect between the actors and their surroundings, further emphasizing the film's status as a product of post-production rather than a captured reality. The notorious digital mustache removal on Superman is merely the most egregious symptom of a film-wide disease where technical polish was sacrificed for the sake of meeting an unmovable release date. The narrative's handling of time and urgency is fundamentally broken, with the Mother Box's activation countdown feeling like an arbitrary device rather than a rising, palpable threat. Steppenwolf's acquisition of the boxes happens with little resistance or strategic complexity, moving the plot forward through convenience rather than through the villain's cunning or the hero's failures. The sense of a global race is absent. The heroes react to events after they occur rather than proactively trying to outmaneuver their foe, putting them in a perpetual state of catch-up that diminishes their agency. The film's geography is confusing, with characters traversing vast distances, from Iceland to the North Sea to Central Europe to Russia, with no sense of travel time or logistical difficulty, making the world feel small and inconsequential. This compression of space and time contributes to the story's overall feeling of being a rushed summary rather than a lived-in experience. The ethical dimension of Batman's plan to use the Mother Box as a WMD to resurrect Superman is glossed over, treated as a risky gambit rather than a potentially catastrophic violation of natural law. No character adequately grapples with the philosophical implications of playing God or the potential of creating an uncontrollable zombie Superman, a moral quandary that should be central to the team's dynamic. Diana's expressed caution is immediately overruled, framing Batman's pragmatism as the correct course despite its terrifying potential consequences, which are realized but quickly resolved. This missed opportunity to explore the team's differing ethics, Bruce's ends justify the means approach versus Diana's reverence for life, flattens their conflict into simple disagreement rather than ideological schism. The resurrection thus becomes a plot coupon to be cashed in, devoid of the spiritual and ethical weight that could have given the film profound thematic resonance. The film's depiction of power and ability is wildly inconsistent, with heroes' strengths fluctuating to serve the needs of specific scenes rather than adhering to any established internal logic. Wonder Woman is shown as powerful enough to stagger Steppenwolf, yet she and Aquaman together are easily overpowered, creating confusion about the villain's actual threat level relative to the team. The Flash's speed is treated as both a universe-altering force and a simple tool for rapid transport, with no clear rules established for its limits or the physics it operates under. Cyborg's technopathy is an all-purpose solution that can hack anything from security systems to alien biotechnology, reducing complex challenges to a simple interface struggle that he always wins. This inconsistency prevents the audience from understanding the true stakes of any confrontation, as the hero's capabilities are undefined and subject to sudden change. The film's soundscape is a critical, overlooked failure, lacking the distinctive auditory signatures that could define the texture of this universe and the unique qualities of each hero. The sonic boom of Superman's flight, the lasso's crackle, the Batmobile's roar, and the Mother Box's hum are either generic or inconsistently applied, missing the chance to build a rich, immersive auditory world. The score's aforementioned issues are compounded by a sound mix that prioritizes generic combat noise and quips over environmental sounds, or the subtle audio cues that build atmosphere and tension. In the final battle, the cacophony is overwhelming and indistinct, a wall of noise that fails to highlight individual heroics or the unique sonic signature of each character's powers. This lack of thoughtful sound design further homogenizes the experience, making it feel like any other noisy blockbuster rather than a story with its own unique sensory identity. The film's treatment of its female characters extends beyond Wonder Woman's passive role to a broader pattern of reducing women to emotional triggers or plot devices. Lois Lane exists solely to pull Superman back from the brink, her own grief and journalistic drive completely sidelined in favor of this restorative function. Martha Kent's role is even more diminished, her scene with Lois cut in a way that removes the profound shared mourning between the two women most affected by Clark's death. Queen Hippolyta is given little to do but deliver exposition and fight briefly, her centuries of wisdom and leadership rendered into a few lines of defiant dialogue. This pattern reflects a script that sees women primarily in relation to the male heroes, as motivators or commerce, rather than as autonomous agents with their own arcs and agendas within the crisis. The film's attempt at humor often stems from an awkward self-awareness, with characters commenting on the absurdity of their own situations in a way that breaks the fourth wall and dissolves narrative tension. Barry Allen's "I'm in" declaration to Batman is played for a laugh that undermines the gravity of the commitment, turning a moment of heroic decision into a punchline. Bruce Wayne's quips about his wealth and Alfred's dry retorts feel imported from a more campy interpretation of the mythology, clashing with the visual and narrative tone of the preceding films. This self-referential humor suggests a deep insecurity, as if the film is apologizing for its own superheroic premise and trying to signal to the audience that it doesn't take itself too seriously. This apology creates a tonal vacuum where neither drama nor comedy can thrive, as each undercuts the other in a continuous cycle of deflation. The marketing campaign and promotional materials for the film promised a darker, more unified vision than what was delivered, creating a palpable sense of bait-and-switch that colored initial audience reactions. Trailers featured shots, lines, and a tonal promise that were entirely absent from the final theatrical product, highlighting the extensive reshoots and last-minute changes. This disconnection between promise and product fueled immediate skepticism and close scrutiny from fans, who began dissecting every frame for evidence of the original vision versus the new material. The public relations narrative surrounding Snyder's departure, framing Whedon's involvement as a simple completion of his friend's work, was revealed to be a disingenuous cover for a wholesale creative overhaul. This marketing duplicity became part of the film's toxic legacy, eroding trust not just in this movie, but in the studio's stewardship of the entire franchise moving forward. The film's economic and cultural context is crucial to understanding its failure, as it represented the culmination of Warner Bros.' frantic attempt to compete with the Marvel Cinematic Universe's decade-long head start. The studio's reaction to the divisive reception of Batman v Superman was one of panic, leading to a course correction that attempted to graft the MCU's tonal template onto the DCU's established, darker foundation. This created an irreconcilable schism at the film's core, a fundamental identity crisis where it was trying to serve two opposing masters. The fans invested in Snyder's mythic saga, and the broader audience presumed to want lighter, funnier fare. The film's middling box office performance proved this strategy to be a miscalculation, pleasing neither constituency and damaging the commercial viability of the entire shared universe concept for DC. It became a stark lesson in the perils of creating art by committee and in reaction to competitors, rather than through a confident, sustained vision. The psychological impact on the cast and crew, who had invested years in a project that was fundamentally altered in their absence, adds a layer of real-world pathos to the film's legacy. Actors returned for reshoots to perform scenes that radically altered their characters' arcs, often with minimal context and under a different director's guidance, creating a professional and emotional dissonance. Crew members who had worked on Snyder's elaborate sets and sequences saw their work drastically cut or res-hot, their contributions diminished in the final, compromised product. This behind-the-scenes turmoil leaked into the public sphere through actor interviews and later allegations, transforming the film from a mere entertainment product into a case study of poor workplace practices and creative disregard. The human cost of this corporate interference became a significant part of the story, fueling the fan movement and shaping the public's perception of the studio as a villain in its own right. The theatrical cut's ultimate failure is one of synthesis. It fails to synthesize its disparate tones, its conflicting visual styles, its rushed character introductions, and its two directorial voices into a coherent, satisfying whole. The seams are not just visible, they are the defining feature, creating a viewing experience that is less about narrative immersion and more about forensic analysis of what went wrong. It is a film that constantly reminds you it is a film, a product, a negotiation, pulling you out of the story at every turn with its inconsistencies and compromises. This lack of a unifying artistic vision results in a final product that has no soul, no core philosophy, no reason for being beyond corporate obligation and franchise logistics. It stands as a testament to the fact that a superhero team-up, the most celebratory moment in comic book mythology, cannot be manufactured through fear and compromise, but must be earned through patient, confident, and coherent storytelling. The film's thematic core, intended to explore hope arising from collective effort, is undermined by the very process of its creation, resulting in a message that feels mandated rather than organically discovered. Each character's personal journey toward hope is truncated, replaced by declarations about teamwork that lack the foundational experiences to give them emotional credibility. The world's transition from despair to optimism happens off-screen, mediated by montage, so the League's victory doesn't feel like a turning point for society, but merely the conclusion of an isolated incident. This failure to connect the internal character arcs with the external societal shift renders the film's central theme a hollow slogan, something the characters say, but the narrative doesn't authentically demonstrate. The concept of faith that Batman mentions is unearned, a thematic shortcut that bypasses the necessary narrative work of showing trust being built through vulnerability and shared sacrifice. The film's pacing operates on a logic of perpetual escalation without adequate respiration, denying the audience the quiet, connective scenes that allow relationships to form and motivations to deepen. We move from one plot point to the next with mechanical efficiency, but the emotional through line is severed, making the journey feel like a checklist rather than an odyssey. Key moments that should land with weight: Arthur Curry witnessing an Atlantean's death, Victor Stone confronting his father, are given mere seconds of screen time, their potential impact lost in the rush to the next action sequence. This breathless rhythm suggests a fear of quiet moments, as if stillness would allow the audience to notice the underdeveloped foundations of the story and characters. The resulting experience is paradoxically both exhausting and forgettable, a barrage of events that never coalesce into a meaningful, memorable narrative. The visual symbolism that was a hallmark of Snyder's previous work is largely absent or rendered inert, replaced by literal-minded imagery that serves plot over theme. The absence of Superman is depicted through empty spaces and somber music, but it lacks the recurring visual motifs, like the recurring image of the world as a fallen Eden, that gave his death in Batman v Superman its mythic weight. Potential symbols, like the cracked Earth of the nightmare future or the regenerative black suit, are excised, stripping the story of a visual language to convey subtext and deeper meaning. What remains are generic superhero iconography. Heroes standing in a line, posed against the sky, which communicates unity only on a surface, promotional level. Without this layer of visual metaphor, the film exists solely on a literal plane, missing the opportunity to elevate its comic book origins into a contemporary myth with enduring resonance. The dialogue's inability to find a consistent voice for the ensemble further fragments the film, with each character speaking in a register that often feels alien to their established persona. Batman's lines oscillate between grim pronouncements and quippy one-liners, creating a schizophrenic impression of a man whose foundational trauma has been conveniently erased. Wonder Woman's speech is either solemn exposition or compassionate encouragement, lacking the wit, diplomatic nuance, or fiery conviction that would make her sound like a nuanced leader and diplomat. The Flash's dialogue is almost entirely anxiety-based humor, neglecting the scientific curiosity and profound empathy that are central to Barry Allen's comic book identity. This inconsistency makes their interactions feel like collisions of archetypes rather than conversations between complex individuals, preventing the banter from ever achieving the easy, character-revealing rhythm of a truly cohesive team. The film's world-building is shockingly narrow, presenting a global crisis that only seems to touch a handful of locations and characters, making the stakes feel curiously small and contained. We see nothing of how governments, militaries, or ordinary citizens are reacting to the Parademon sightings or the mysterious terrorist attacks, creating a narrative vacuum where the League operates in a bubble. The inclusion of a single Russian family in the final battle is a tokenistic attempt to raise the stakes, but it feels manipulative and isolated rather than representative of a global population under threat. This myopic focus makes the conflict feel like a private superhero affair rather than a true planetary invasion, undermining the very reason a league is necessary. A world-saving event should feel world-encompassing, but here it feels like a localized skirmish that happens to have apocalyptic implications. The power dynamics within the team are never properly established or explored, resulting in a flat hierarchy where leadership is assumed rather than negotiated and conflicts are smoothed over rather than confronted. Batman assumes the role of mastermind without his tactical genius being demonstrated in a way that earns the others' respect. He simply barks orders that are followed. Wonder Woman's natural authority, born of centuries of experience, is subordinate to his planning, a dynamic that goes unexamined and unchallenged. The newer members, Flash and Cyborg, are treated as talented recruits rather than equals with valuable perspectives, their suggestions framed as naivete rather than alternative approaches. This lack of interpersonal friction and power struggle makes the team's unity feel preordained and bland, missing the dramatic potential of watching a dominant alpha like Batman learn to truly collaborate. The film's treatment of death and consequence is notably toothless, reducing Superman's sacrifice to a reversible plot point and ensuring no meaningful peril ever touches the core team or the world they protect. The resurrection undermines the finality and meaning of his death in Batman v Superman, retroactively making that film's climactic emotional beat feel like a temporary inconvenience. Steppenwolf's defeat involves no lasting cost or sacrifice from the heroes. They emerge unscathed and triumphant, with their world perfectly restored, which eliminates any sense of hard-won victory. Even the potential death of the Russian family is averted with ease, ensuring the film adheres to a risk-averse, consequence-free model that prevents genuine tension. This sanitized approach renders the conflict weightless, as there is no tangible cost to the victory, nothing lost that would make the win feel earned or significant. The cinematography, outside of the clearly identifiable Snyder shots, adopts a generic, television-like quality during dialogue scenes, with flat lighting and standard shot-reverse shot compositions that lack artistic intention. These scenes feel like they exist solely to convey information, with no directorial flair or visual storytelling to make them engaging in their own right. The contrast between these blandly functional scenes and the more stylized action sequences creates a jarring disparity in directorial investment, as if two different classes of filmmaking are awkwardly spliced together. The camera rarely moves in an expressive way during character moments, preferring static setups that further emphasize the theatrical, uncinematic nature of the reshoot dialogue. This visual apathy during critical expository or emotional moments signals a film that has given up on being a cohesive visual experience, settling for mere narrative conveyance. The film's score fails to provide emotional guidance or thematic reinforcement, often working at cross purposes with the action on screen or disappearing entirely into the sonic wallpaper. The reintroduction of old themes is not woven into new compositions in a meaningful way. They are simply pasted over scenes, creating a nostalgic buzz that contradicts the new narrative context. In moments requiring grandeur or pathos, the music swells predictably, but without a distinctive melodic identity, relying on orchestral cliché rather than character-specific motifs that could deepen our connection. The lack of a strong, new central theme for the Justice League itself is a profound missed opportunity, leaving the team without a sonic identity to match their visual assembly. The auditory experience thus becomes one of recognition of old themes or emptiness of generic new ones, never achieving the inspirational or mythic quality the story desperately needs. The editing rhythm contributes significantly to the film's emotional inertness, cutting away from actors' performances at the exact moment a reaction or silent thought might have conveyed unspoken depth. We see the beginning of a poignant look from Victor Stone, or a flicker of doubt on Bruce Wayne's face, but the edit quickly jumps to the next line or action, denying the moment time to resonate. This creates a superficial performance style where actors are only allowed to convey the primary, scripted emotion, with no room for the subtext and complexity that great screen acting requires. The film seems terrified of silence, of a held gaze, of the spaces between words where real character is often revealed. This editorial anxiety results in a narrative that tells us everything and shows us nothing, prioritizing plot transmission over immersive, character-driven storytelling. The film's relationship with its own comic book lore is one of casual appropriation, lifting elements without understanding or committing to the deeper mythology that gives them meaning. The mother boxes are treated as powerful MacGuffins, not the sentient, universe-spanning technology of the new gods' mythology with their own consciousness and agenda. The history of Darkseid's first invasion is stripped of its scale and horror, becoming a brief flashback rather than the foundational trauma of the DC universe. Characters like Silas Stone and Commissioner Gordon are reduced to plot functions, their rich histories and relationships in the comics ignored for the sake of streamlined simplicity. This approach treats the source material as a quarry for parts, not as a living tapestry to be respectfully adapted and expanded upon, resulting in a story that feels derivative of comic books in general rather than a faithful evolution of its specific, beloved canon. The final act's spatial geography is confusing and poorly established, making it difficult to understand where characters are in relation to each other and to the central threat, diminishing the tactical coherence of the battle. The Russian power plant setting is a generic, gray industrial maze, lacking distinctive landmarks that would help the audience track the simultaneous struggles of the League members. The cross-cutting between Batman on the ground, the Atlantean and Amazon on the front lines, and Cyborg and the Flash at the core feels disjointed, failing to build a cohesive sense of a single, multi-front engagement. This lack of clear spatial logic reduces the climax to a series of isolated cool moments rather than a strategically intricate, interconnected team effort. We understand they are all fighting hard, but we cannot feel how their individual fights combine to form a unified whole, which is the entire point of a league. The film's denouement is so abrupt it feels like an abandonment, offering no reflection on the changed world or the altered relationships between these characters who have just shared a life-altering event. We do not see them decompress, grieve, or celebrate together. They simply stand in a new garage, their mission accomplished. The promise of future adventures is made through a literal conversation about needing a bigger table, a moment of forced levity that ignores the profound transformation that should have just occurred. This lack of a meaningful aftermath makes the entire film feel like a prologue, an assembly reel that ends just as the real story, the story of a team, is about to begin. By denying us this crucial epilogue, the film confirms its own status as a product, a setup for sequels, rather than a complete, satisfying narrative with its own earned conclusion. The film's most enduring cultural impact may be as the definitive example of the Frankenfilm, a patchwork creation whose scars are visible to the naked eye, inspiring both pity and morbid fascination. It joins a rare canon of films whose production tragedies are more compelling than their plots, a testament to how the best intentions and worst corporate instincts can collide with disastrous artistic results. It serves as a warning to studios about the limits of fan patience and the dangers of transparently cynical course correction in an era where audiences are hyper-aware of production gossip. For filmmakers, it stands as a grim reminder of the fragility of artistic vision in the face of immense commercial pressure and personal tragedy. And for audiences, it remains a unique, frustrating artifact, a blockbuster that is impossible to judge solely on its own terms, forever haunted by the ghost of the film it could have been, and later, by the specter of the film that was eventually released in its stead. The character of Alfred Pennyworth is reduced to a mere sounding board and mechanic, his customary role as Bruce Wayne's moral compass and emotional anchor completely sidelined in favor of sarcastic quips and technical support. His dialogue lacks the depth of concern and historical wisdom that defines his relationship with Bruce, serving instead as a source of dry wit that further lightens the film's tone inappropriately. The profound, almost paternal worry he exhibited in Batman v Superman is absent, replaced by a bemused detachment that suggests even he isn't taking the apocalyptic threat seriously. This squanders Jeremy Irons' ability to convey layers of loyalty and concern with a single glance, flattening one of the franchise's most nuanced relationships into a purely functional dynamic. Alfred's potential to question Bruce's guilt-driven mission or offer solace is ignored, removing a key source of internal reflection for the protagonist. The film's color palette is a battleground between two competing philosophies: Snyder's desaturated, high-contrast aesthetic representing a world under threat, and the brightened, flatter look of the reshoots aiming for a more conventional, optimistic blockbuster feel. This results in scenes where Superman's suit inexplicably shifts from a deep, textured blue to a garish, electric hue depending on which director's footage is being used, visually destabilizing the character's presence. The gloomy, rain-slicked atmosphere of Batman's scenes clashes violently with the brightly lit, sterile environments of the SDR labs or the League's new headquarters, preventing the film from establishing a coherent visual mood. This inconsistency extends to lighting, where dramatic shadows and chiaroscuro are abandoned in dialogue scenes for even, uninteresting light that exposes every flaw in the rushed digital effects. The film therefore lacks a singular visual identity, constantly reminding the viewer of its fractured origins through its jarring and unartful color grading choices. The narrative makes a critical error in depicting the world's reaction to Superman's return as an unambiguously joyful event, completely ignoring the complex global fear and political turmoil his resurrection would logically incite. His death was a public, traumatic event. His return from the grave would be the most shocking and terrifying occurrence in human history, raising questions of divinity, alien agency, and existential threat. The film bypasses this rich, dramatic territory entirely, showing only smiling faces and positive news reports, a decision that feels intellectually dishonest and emotionally simplistic. This missed opportunity to explore humanity's fraught relationship with a godlike being removes a core tension from the Superman mythos and simplifies the world into a childlike binary of hope versus despair. By ignoring the profound terror his return would cause, the film makes its central symbol of hope feel cheap, unearned, and devoid of the challenging complexity that makes the character compelling. The action choreography lacks a sense of physical consequence and weight, with characters often hitting each other with world-shattering force, but showing little cumulative damage or strategic adaptation. Blows from Steppenwolf send heroes flying, but they recover instantly, removing any sense of pain, fatigue, or tactical learning from one engagement to the next. Fight scenes are edited in a rapid, disjointed style that prioritizes quick cuts over clear spatial geography, making it difficult to follow the flow of combat and appreciate the skill or power on display. This is particularly damaging to Wonder Woman and Aquaman, whose fighting styles should be distinct blends of grace and brutal power, but are rendered as generic super-strength brawling. The action becomes a repetitive series of impacts without progression, failing to tell a visual story of the heroes being pushed to their limits, learning from failures, and adapting their strategies to overcome a superior foe. The film's use of slow motion, a Snyder trademark, feels imported and unearned in the reshoot scenes, deployed as a generic stylistic tick rather than a meaningful narrative tool to highlight pivotal moments. In Snyder's original footage, slow motion is used to mythologize actions, to give weight to a hero's sacrifice or the terrifying power of a villain. In the theatrical cut, it is often applied arbitrarily, to the Flash stumbling or Wonder Woman blocking a single shot, diluting its power and making it feel like an aesthetic affectation. This misapplication robs the technique of its thematic purpose, turning it from a tool of epic storytelling into a mere visual filter. Another example of the film mimicking surface-level style without understanding underlying substance. Consequently, moments that should feel monumental are rendered slightly ridiculous, as the slow motion emphasizes the artifice of the action rather than its emotional or symbolic significance. The script's handling of exposition is remarkably clumsy, often having characters deliver dense blocks of lore-filled dialogue in situations of high tension where such speeches feel unnatural and forced. Wonder Woman becomes a walking history textbook, explaining mother boxes and old gods to Batman in ways that suggest he hasn't done his own research, which undermines his intelligence. Victor Stone verbally explains his own origin and powers in a single, compressed monologue that feels like a trailer for a movie we're not watching, rather than an organic part of a conversation. This info-dumping approach treats the audience with impatience, prioritizing plot transmission over immersive discovery, and stunts the natural development of character relationships through shared investigation. The world's mythology feels handed to us on a pamphlet, not unearthed through the hero's journey, making the lore feel academic and inert rather than mysterious and alive. The film introduces the concept of fear as a thematic and even biological catalyst, attracting parademons, but fails to explore this idea in any meaningful way beyond a simple plot device. We are told the world is fearful after Superman's death, but we are not shown a society gripped by paranoia, conflict, and despair in a way that visually or narratively justifies an alien invasion. The heroes themselves never grapple with their own fears in a substantive way. Batman's fear of inadequacy, Cyborg's fear of his body, Flash's fear of failure are mentioned, but not dramatized as internal obstacles to overcome. Consequently, the parademons remain generic bug monsters rather than manifestations of a compelling psychological theme, and their defeat carries no symbolic weight of conquered terror. A rich idea that could have unified character arcs and villain mechanics is reduced to a throwaway line of dialogue, representing the film's habit of introducing and abandoning promising concepts. The physical design of the mother boxes themselves is uninspired, resembling generic sci-fi cubes that glow and float, lacking the intricate, almost organic technological aesthetic that would suggest their ancient and alien origin. They do not feel like sentient, universe-altering artifacts, but like powerful batteries or computers, which diminishes the mystical horror of the unity they are meant to enact. Their function is purely mechanical. 3 boxes combine to reshape matter. There is no sense of their whispered corruption, their influence on those around them, or their connection to the deeper evil of apocalypse. This bland design reflects the film's broader failure to imagine its cosmic elements as truly alien and terrifying, opting instead for familiar, earthbound sci-fi visuals that fail to expand the audience's sense of wonder or dread. They are plot coupons, visually and narratively, not the terrifying hearts of the story. The film's attempt to create cool moments often backfires, feeling focus-tested and inserted without proper narrative buildup, which robs them of their intended impact. Superman catching up to and outpacing the Flash in a race is meant to be a crowd-pleasing display of power, but because their relationship is undeveloped, it plays as a cheap dominance display rather than a character moment. Batman's line, "I'm rich," is a clear attempt at a Tony Stark-esque quip, but it clashes so violently with the established, tortured Batman persona that it generates cringes, not laughs. These moments feel parachuted in from a different, more glib film, sticking out as obvious attempts to manufacture meme-worthy content rather than organic outgrowths of story and character. They highlight the film's reactive, committee-driven nature, where scenes are constructed to serve a marketing beat rather than the internal logic of the narrative. The complete absence of any meaningful religious or philosophical inquiry in a story about death and resurrection is a staggering omission, given the subject matter's inherent depth. Superman's return could be framed through countless lenses: as a Christ allegory, a Pandora's box scenario, a scientific miracle, or a harbinger of the transhuman era. The film touches none of these. His resurrection is a technical process with a temporary malfunction, devoid of spiritual awe, ethical debate, or cosmic consequence. This secular, literal-minded approach drains the story of its potential grandeur and thematic weight, making it a simple problem of power allocation. The world lacked a sufficient weapon, so they built one. By avoiding the profound questions it raises, the film confirms its own identity as a superficial product, afraid to engage with the deeper implications of its own mythological framework. The film's third act suffers from a critical lack of dramatic irony. The audience knows no more than the heroes, and there are no hidden layers, character secrets, or thematic undercurrents to give the conflict deeper meaning. We simply watch them try to stop a villain from completing a goal, with no twist, betrayal, or revelation that recontextualizes the struggle or the characters' relationships. Steppenwolf has no secret plan, the mother boxes have no hidden agenda, and no hero is wrestling with a moral choice that could alter the outcome. This results in a linear, predictable race against a clock where suspense is generated solely by whether they can physically reach the boxes in time, a shallow form of tension that relies entirely on editing and spectacle. Without subtext or surprise, the climax is all engine and no soul, a mechanical resolution to a mechanical plot. The film's dialogue during action sequences is particularly grating, filled with unnecessary quips and explanations that undermine the visual storytelling and the intensity of the moment. Characters feel compelled to verbally announce what they are doing or what is happening, as if the audience cannot trust the images to convey the information. This verbal clutter suggests a fundamental insecurity in the filmmaking, a belief that the action itself is not compelling or clear enough to hold attention without constant commentary. It also prevents the action from achieving a visceral, wordless power, where the audience is immersed in the physical struggle rather than being pulled out of it by a joke or exclamation. The sound mix often prioritizes this chatter over the impactful sounds of combat, further diminishing the sensory and emotional power of the battles. The film's portrayal of technology is curiously anachronistic and nonsensical, mixing futuristic holograms with mundane interfaces in a way that feels inconsistent and poorly thought out. Cyborg's body can project complex holographic displays and interface with alien biotechnology, yet Batman's surveillance relies on generic computer screens and keyboards. The Kryptonian scout ship's technology is rendered with a certain biomechanical elegance, while SDR Labs looks like a generic, clean corporate facility. This lack of a cohesive technological aesthetic makes the world feel disjointed, as if advanced alien tech, cybernetics, and human technology exist on completely separate design tracks with no influence on each other. It's a small but telling world-building failure that prevents the universe from feeling like a believable, integrated whole. The film's emotional climax is misplaced, arriving not with the defeat of Steppenwolf, but with the brief, silent shot of the restored Superman floating in the sun before the final battle. This moment, a remnant of Snyder's vision, carries more genuine emotion and thematic resonance than the entire noisy, consequence-free battle that follows. It's a moment of pure iconography and renewal that the rest of the film hasn't earned, feeling emotionally disconnected from the surrounding narrative precisely because it works on a symbolic level the rest of the movie rejects. This creates a bizarre dissonance where the most powerful emotional beat is a quiet, wordless image that has little to do with the team's collective struggle, underscoring how the film's heart and its plot are fundamentally misaligned. The true victory the film accidentally suggests is not the League's teamwork, but the return of their god, a problematic message that the rest of the film tries and fails to argue against.